Want to skip the small talk and get into the heart of it? So do we. Life isn't about perfection, it's about connection. And together, we're building healthy relationships, one conversation at a time. This is Say It Here.
Hey, welcome to Say It Here. We're so excited to be here with you today. My name is Judy Franco.
And I'm Corey Ajme.
And today we have a very special guest who everybody is just freaking out over. They cannot wait to actually hear you. Lots of our listeners have read your book, but I just want to take a second to introduce our guest. She is the OG toddler parenting expert of Instagram, and she's here to talk with us today. Her name is Devon Kuntzman, and let me tell you something. She is the toddler whisperer. She's an ICF certified coach, and she helps thousands of families every year with courses and workshops that she offers through her program, which is called Transforming Toddlerhood. And it really works. And she wants to prove to everybody that toddlerhood is terrible is a myth. So you're saying to us, Devon, that toddlerhood is not terrible.
Yes. What I'm saying is that sometimes toddlerhood might feel terrible, right? Like there might be those moments where you're exhausted, you're tired, you tell your toddler to do something, they look you in the eye and do the exact opposite. It can feel really terrible, but our feelings are not facts, and toddlers in general in this developmental period is not terrible. I like to say it's challenging, but it's also a critical developmental period, and it really lays the foundation for the rest of your child's life in terms of their emotional health and development, their brain development, and so we just have to get rid of that label that disempowers us so we can really embrace what an important and, dare I even say, fun and silly developmental period that this is.
You know, I have to tell you, I've been remiss because, first of all, I did not mention, I don't even think I said the name of the book is the same name, Transforming Toddlerhood. Lots of people know it, and a lot of people listening to us right now are really excited to hear what you have to say. I didn't get a chance to formally welcome you and thank you for being here.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah. So the best part of the book is, well, there are a lot of great parts of the book, but what most people love about the book is that there's these practical little bite-sized chapters with scripts that makes it easy for us to follow, red flags to watch out for, and guidance for tantrums, power struggles, all the things we suffer with when we are raising toddlers. And also, we're not going to think about it as suffering anymore, right?
Right.
Yes.
But also, if parents of toddlers don't have time often to sit and read full books. So to have it organized how you did in small sections was really wise, I think, and very practical.
Yes. You know, I really wanted to write a book that was a book that I could actually read because I'm a mom to a toddler.
Right.
And let me tell you, I have not read many books recently.
Yeah.
And if I have read them, it has been just listening to a book to escape like daily life, so some type of fiction book on Audible or something like this. So I wanted to write a book that parents could actually use because I have tons of books that just sit on my shelf and gather dust. So I wanted this to be a real user manual and a real parenting companion that parents could just open to the chapter they need when they need answers instead of feeling like they have to read a whole book to try to glean, 5 or 6 concepts from.
I'd like to start, if it's okay with you. Can you set the stage for us? Can you put us into the world of a toddler? What's going on in their brain? How do they see the world and what's happening for them?
Yeah. Well, just imagine, it's so hard for us to imagine and put ourselves in a toddler's shoes because first, our brains are fully mature. So we think very logically and we really just don't remember the day-to-day, what it felt like to be so little. But just imagine not having a lot of life experience. Most of the things happening in the world are new. You're trying to figure out how the world works, how your body works. You realize your body can't do things that you see other people doing. doing because you're small and you're just learning. And then you have all of these emotional needs, all these physical needs that you can't meet yourself, and you rely on the people around you to help you out. And sometimes you don't even know how to ask for what you need because you don't even know what the need is. And so you're crying, you're kicking, you're hitting, you're trying to communicate the best way you know how. Then this adult that you're trying to communicate with all of a sudden is maybe yelling at you, putting you in timeout, telling you that you're being mean or bad, when really you just have an immature brain, you're lacking impulse control, lacking emotional regulation skills, and lacking expressive language skills. And so it's just so hard. And I don't say this to put parents and adults down. Like, we're all human beings. We're going to make mistakes. Things aren't going to go great.
Even you make mistakes?
Totally. Like, I'm a human being. And at the same time, we have to just try to remember to put ourselves in a toddler's shoes because it's not readily accessible in our brains, I feel like, to remember that.
So how do we? What do we say to ourselves when the bottle went on the floor for the 15th time or the cereal is now spilled over for the 10th time you said don't spill the cereal?
Yes. So typically, parents will give a scenario. I'll get a DM on Instagram. Parents will give a scenario, any scenario like the ones you just gave. And then they'll say, so what punishment should I give for this behavior? And so the first thing I write back is, so this behavior in your mind is a bad behavior. You're looking at behavior as either good or bad. Behavior that we like is good. Behavior we don't like is bad. So if you label this behavior as bad, you're going to be asking, what punishment should I give to make this behavior stop? But in reality, all behavior is communication. And if we look at it through this lens, we start to ask ourselves, what is my child trying to tell me? What support does my child need in meeting this expectation? What skill does my child need to learn to be successful here? So these are the questions we start to ask ourselves, and it becomes easier to ask ourselves these questions when we look at behavior as communication because we can get less triggered by it. Because if we look at behavior as bad, now our child has done something wrong, done something against us, and that has to be stopped. And then we get into a power struggle, and the frustration just builds and builds and builds.
Wow. So give me an example of what the kid is trying to tell me when he threw the cereal over again after I asked him not to.
Yes. So it depends. You might have a new baby in your arms. And so your little one's just saying, I want to be seen. I want to be heard. Or maybe your little one skipped their nap. Or maybe they were up in the night because they weren't feeling well or teething. So they're really tired. So they just can't control themselves right now. Maybe your child really wanted pancakes for breakfast and you said no. You gave them cereal and now they're tossing the cereal because they're really upset trying to accept the limit of we're having cereal, not pancakes today. And so we've just taken away their autonomy, set a limit, which is totally normal thing to do, but they're having trouble coping with that. So that's why when I talk about in my book, how to overcome challenging behaviors, I talk about the recipe for healthy, effective discipline. And the first ingredient of that recipe is creating connection. And part of creating connection is getting curious. We have to get curious about what the behavior is trying to tell us so we can address it. If we just look at all behavior as like good or bad, we say go to timeout, say you're sorry, whatever, and we move on. But we haven't actually got to the root to transform the behavior to teach our child what to do next time. So when we start getting curious and we're like, okay, what is this behavior really trying to tell us? Sometimes we'll get it. Sometimes we won't, but just knowing that it's trying to tell us something is going to change our approach. And when we create connection, we're creating influence, which creates cooperation. Connection is the backbone to everything that we want to accomplish in parenting.
That's amazing too. You brought up control before, Devon, and I've read that you talk about obedience. And obedience is really what a lot of parents ask for, especially a lot of moms, because maybe they're home more with the toddler. And it's like, that's not the goal, is it?
Yeah, toddlers, they're wired to test our limits because they're trying to become their own person. They're wired to be their own person, to try new things, to experiment and explore, to exert their will, to have a sense of control. These are all developmental needs that are wired within them that are really creating and informing a lot of their behavior. At the same time, we can't control another human being as much as we want to. When things start feeling chaotic, the first thing we want to do is tamp it down, get back in control, right? That's just a normal human need. That's how we all feel. That's how we all operate. The thing is, though, is that the more you try to control your toddler, the more you're probably going to get into power struggles, especially if you have a toddler that's more strong-willed. If you have a toddler that's a little more meek and mild-mannered, then maybe they're going to comply. But now we're getting into this pattern of listening to authority no matter what, and doing that above our own feelings, emotions, and needs. So we have to think about, what is the ultimate goal? The ultimate goal is for our children to have the skills, the impulse control skills, the emotional regulation skills, the problem solving skills to be successful later in life as they grow up as teens and as young adults and as adults. And so when we start thinking about what is our ultimate goal here, and we're only practicing obedience first parenting, which is, out of all the research, it's called authoritarian parenting, then what we're basically doing is we're not giving our children the room and the opportunity to practice these skills. So either we're creating a little people pleaser, or we have a child who, might be kind of swallowing it, but you just watch them rebel as soon as they're stronger, faster, quicker, smarter than us.
Right.
It's frightening to think about. I think about a young woman who hasn't had the opportunity to exert her own power or have control of herself, and getting into situations in her teenage years where she hasn't learned that she could say no to maybe somebody who's older, or push back, or just trying to comply because that's actually what she was taught. It's actually pretty frightening.
Mm-hmm. And then to all the parents listening, then they're like, okay, so Devon, I'm just supposed to let my kid run around and run my life and rule the world?
That was my next question.
Because that's where the conversation always goes, right?
Of course.
Okay, so you're telling me not to do this, so it must mean I'm going to do that. That's the biggest challenge, is that when parents hear this, they're like, okay, well, then I'm going to be gentle. I'm going to listen to all my child's feelings and emotions, and I'm going to let them have their voice and have a say. But the problem is that we overcorrect and go too far the other direction, where we are taking our child's feelings, emotions, and needs into consideration. I have a whole chapter on this in my book called Knowing Your Parenting Role. And so basically what happens is the child has way too much power in this relationship. And so then your child's running the show. And we know how frustrating and exhausting that can feel as well.
Boy.
So what I want parents to understand is that the goal here is to, yes, have our children feel seen and heard, but we are still in charge. And to be in charge, it means we're setting limits and we're following through on them. We're clear about our expectations, and we are also teaching skills. We're teaching kids what to do instead. When we're using compliance first parenting, we're saying, stop, don't do that. Go to your room, go to timeout. That was bad. But we're not teaching kids what to do next time to be successful. We're not teaching them how to do better. So really what we want to do is, yes, have our child seen and heard, set clear limits and expectations and follow through on them, and then teach skills. And that actually is the full recipe for effective discipline.
It's amazing because one of the hardest parts of that is the follow through. You could say anything you want, but the follow through is tough, and the most important part probably.
Yes, I think it's so tough because for a few reasons. First, parents, when you set a limit, your child's going to have a reaction because we're taking away their autonomy in that moment. And then parents are taken aback by that. And then they're like, okay, sorry. Because either they don't want to hear the crying, or they feel like they're emotionally damaging their child or something like this. And at the same time, parents also think that when you set the limit, that's the last step in the process. But really setting the limit is the first step in the process. You have to set the limit. Your toddler is going to test it. So you have to follow through on the limit. Your toddler is going to have a reaction when they see you stand firm in your limit. They're going to get upset. They might hit, kick, cry, scream, say you're not my friend anymore. It's your job to support their big emotions while still setting limits on unsafe behavior. It's their job to accept the limit. So I just want parents to know that your child's not bad or wrong, or nor are you when you set a limit and they have a big reaction. That's actually part of the process of your child accepting the limit.
So if I had to take this in steps, Devon, could I say that the first thing I should ask myself is, what is he trying to tell me, or what is he trying to communicate to me? Is that the first step?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so for every parent, you have scripts, you have worksheets, you have all these wonderful things. If you had to give me the first tool, you would say first, when your kid is throwing the cereal over, I hate to keep using that one, but the first thing I should ask myself is, what is he trying to say to me?
Yes, because it'll likely inform how you're going to respond.
Okay, but there should be no doubt about when he actually does deserve the discipline, because I've already set the limits from the very beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Why weren't you around for me when my kids were toddlers? It sounds so easy now.
And in the heat of the moment when we're stressed and we're like, okay, what do we do here? It can be challenging, but that's where, let's just take the story in the cereal standpoint. You might say something like, you're throwing the cereal on the floor. Cereal stays on the bowl or in the plate or in the bowl or on the table or something like this.
Yeah.
And then say they do it again. I see you're having trouble keeping the cereal in your bowl, so I'm going to put you down now. This tells me you're done eating.
Right.
And then
right.
you can, a little bit later when they're calm, you can say something like, I wonder what you're trying to tell me when you're throwing that cereal everywhere.
Amazing.
Were you trying to say, all done? Oh, you were all done. Okay, next time you can say all done. So see how we follow up with teaching the skill. Sometimes we teach the skill in the moment, but if our child's too dysregulated or we're too dysregulated, no one's learning in that space. So we have to pause and wait for a calmer moment.
Yes, and that's the other important thing too, is to be able to distinguish between moments that actually are teachable and ones that are not. That's a big challenge.
Waiting, I think, is key.
Yeah.
Waiting till the child calms down. But, I think a lot of parents hear this too, and their first reaction is, who has time? Like, I'm late for the carpool when the cereal hits the floor, and I don't have time for this, and it's too hard. And I think ultimately it's easier. Do you agree, Devon?
Yes.
Do you think parenting becomes easier, or this becomes more natural in time?
Yeah, absolutely. Because we're setting our kids up to be independent thinkers, problem solvers, team players. So we don't have to worry about still trying to have the upper hand and keep that illusion of control intact when we're doing compliance first parenting, because we're starting to involve our kid in the process and we're helping them scaffold those skills. It does take more effort up front. Some moments you're going to be able to do it. Other moments you're going to be tapped out and I can't do another thing. But here's the most important thing. The first most important thing is just to make sure everyone's safe. If you're safe and your child's safe, you don't have to address anything right now. So if you needed to get out the door, guess what? That cereal's still going to be there in an hour. Address it later.
Right.
Say you come home after 2 hours and you're like, oh, look, that cereal's all over the floor. You had trouble keeping it in your bowl and now it's on the floor. Let's clean it up together. Here's the broom. I'll hold the pail, whatever. And kids are actually going to be more likely to do it because we're not shaming them. If we come at them with something like, see, you put that cereal all over the floor. Why would you do that? That is not nice. That is bad. You don't do that next time. Is your child going to feel good about helping clean it up?
No.
No, they're not.
I might be using some of these tips in my marriage too. I'll have you know.
Well, I just love you saying that, because with all of my private coaching clients throughout all the years, so I've always done a lot of one-on-one coaching until my son was born. And now I don't do as much, but all of my clients with time are like, I feel like I could use this with my coworker, my parenting partner, my mother-in-law. I'm like, guess what? Parenting is a relationship.
Yep.
Parenting is one type of relationship we are in our lives. And these skills are relationship skills, communication skills, problem-solving skills, conflict resolution skills. And that's why we're using these skills with our kids, because when we model these skills with our kids and use them, then our kids grow up to be adults that can use these skills too.
That's kind of
amazing.
what I
Oh,
meant when I said it makes things easier on the back end.
Mhm.
Like you put in the time when they're toddlers and then they're not carrying all that shame, let's just say, or they've learned relational skills that make friendships and marriages easier. So I think it seems it's very important to put the time in up front, even if it takes a little bit more energy when they're young.
Mhm.
definitely. Plus, what relationships do you want to really have that are like a power struggle? It just eliminates that whole dynamic
Mhm.
of a power struggle.
It does sound more fun.
It works. It works if you work it. I have to ask you a very important question, though. We forgot to mention that you're like a nanny for high profile people, and that's part of the reason why now you're so high profile. So I have to ask you, obviously, you're not going to give us any of the names, but can you tell us a story of how you had to use your skills on kids that were not your own?
Yes. And I can also give an example. I'm glad you brought this up because I can give an example that really was the catalyst for starting everything that I'm doing today.
Oh, good.
So I just remember this one day when this mom came home and her toddler was in the bathtub and things were going okay. Her little one was kind of tired. Her mom came home and then all of a sudden it was just tears and upsetness and this wasn't right and that wasn't right. And then poor mom was like feeling so defeated and so upset because she came home so excited to see her kid. But within like 15 minutes, her kiddo's just like a mess and crying and tantruming and all the things. And then she says, why did I even come home from work? I should have just stayed at work. And I was like,
Oh,
ugh. I was like, this is a classic case of miscommunication where this toddler is communicating the best way they know how, and it's not connecting with the parent. And this is why I'm so adamant about dispelling the myth that toddlerhood is terrible and helping parents decode behavior so they can understand what their toddler is trying to tell them so they can respond in a way that really works with their child's development instead of against it. So like that moment is really like the moment that made me want to start transforming toddlerhood and has really guided like the principles of what we're doing here.
you
Yeah.
can't tell a mom while you're listening to this, even though you know this is like the wrong thing to say, are you going to go to the mom and be like, that's not really the way you should talk to your toddler? You can't.
Right. It's a tough position to be in, right? This is also another reason why I started Transforming Toddler, because I really wanted to work with parents who were interested in learning this and wanting to have things go differently in their home. And so for myself, I just remember this one day that I was watching this little one. He had just had a rough day from the start. Like nothing was right. Like toast wasn't cut correctly and there was the wrong cup and all the things. And then I don't remember what happened, but it culminated into this epic meltdown. And back then I just was still coming from this idea that if the child listened and had good behavior, I was doing a good job. And if
Mhm.
they had bad behavior and didn't listen, I was doing a bad job. And that day when this little one was just on the ground crying and so upset and threw something at me. And then I put him in timeout and he just like went manic, like just like a volcano erupting. At that moment, I was on the floor in tears because I'm like, what are we doing here? This is so hard. He's so upset. I'm so upset. What are we doing? I just sat down beside him, just kind of put my head like this, like kind of calmly, and then just like opened my arms. And after like a minute, he came and crawled in my arms. And I was like, listen, we are all human here doing our best. And this kiddo is not trying to make my life miserable. He's not trying to be quote unquote bad. He is having a
Right.
hard time right now and needs someone to help him come back to his emotional equilibrium.
I mean, we could all relate to that story. And if
Sure.
only we could keep these things in our head, it's so important.
Yeah. And, you touched on something I think that's important too is like mom shame. You're out at a store somewhere and your toddler starts having a tantrum and it's loud and messy and people start staring. And people assume things about the parent and moms have a hard time. Can you shed some light on that for us so moms can feel good about those moments?
Yes. Well, what I want to say is that we've all been there.
Yeah.
We've all done that. And what I've come to learn going through it myself and talking to so many parents over the last 8 years is that we're our own worst critic. In these moments, yes, people might stop. Yes, people might look because humans are curious by nature. Like literally, like every time we're driving down the highway and there's a car pulled off on the side of the road, all of a sudden there's a traffic jam for no reason, only because people just wanted to see what was going on, right?
Right.
And
right.
so we know we're curious by nature. And so oftentimes the worst story that we're telling ourselves about ourselves as a parent, we're projecting onto others thinking everyone's thinking the same. Now, don't get me wrong. Sometimes there are those people out there that are like, giving you the stink eye or even have the audacity to say something. I just want every parent listening to know that has nothing to do with you or your child. That person on the airplane who's looking at you like your kid's not welcome here, that has nothing to do with you or your child. That has to do with how this adult was raised as a child, how their parents reacted to them, how they have been conditioned, their life experiences. That's their frame of reference for what's happening. And that's why they're reacting and triggered. It actually has nothing to do with you and your kiddo. Yes, toddlers are allowed to take up space. There are going to be times your kid's melting down on an airplane, in an airport, in a parking lot, at a store. That is just the fact of life. Toddlers need to have their quote unquote emotional poop sometimes, right? They got to release all those emotions to come back to their equilibrium.
I'm so glad that you're saying terrible toddlerhood is a myth. Because I just realized this. We all accept the term terrible twos as though it's a clinical diagnosis. And the truth is, it's like negative self-talk. I love that you're changing the paradigm. Why do we keep on calling it terrible when you're allowing us an opportunity here to really shift our mindset about it? What are we changing it to?
Teachable. I think
Love
teachable because I always say this, each and every moment, all of those challenges, all of those moments that we're like, oh my gosh, is this really happening? Why can it just stop?
Right.
All of those moments are actually opportunities. They're opportunities for learning and growth for yourself as the adult and for your child. And so I think that we should just call them teachable.
I love that, Devon. I feel like I could talk to you all day long. Corey, you have anything else?
Okay. You're not supposed to say to a young child, you're so beautiful, you're so pretty.
So it's not necessarily that we, can't give a child a compliment, but the challenge is if we're only giving children compliments on fixed traits, then it doesn't help them in cultivating a growth mindset. And there's a lot of research out there that when we label kids, whether it's a positive label, like you're so smart, or a negative label, like you're so mean, then kids start to believe this and internalize it. And then say a child who's been labeled smart, then they might be more afraid to try new things and to take risks because if they fail at it, then they might not be smart. And so there's just a lot of research on helping kids cultivate a growth mindset and how labels can be more of a hindrance than a help.
That's so good to know, to compliment them on things that they've really earned.
Yeah, focusing on things that they can control, like effort versus an outcome or a fixed trait are going to support kids a lot more. So again, it's not like you're messing up your child if you say, oh, you're so gorgeous, but you might say something like, I love the dress that you picked out today or something like that, which is not a fixed trait.
So, Devon, there are a lot of differing opinions on the best approach to potty training today. And I figure you're the one who's going to have probably a really good answer to that. What should we be doing?
Well, the first thing I want to say is that potty training in 3 days is a myth because the whole point of potty training is to take your child from being a passive bystander to an active participant. And how do we do that? Through learning a series of skills that we continue building upon. Yes, some children can make great progress in 3 days, but that doesn't mean that they're never going to have an accident. So saying potty training in 3 days can really give parents false expectations that then can make them feel like they're failing or that there's something wrong with their child when it doesn't work in 3 days. So instead, I really want parents to think about, how do we build all the skills? And so the first thing you can do is start changing your toddler in the bathroom, standing up. Get rid of all of the diaper changing stations. Just get rid of them. Come into the bathroom. Change your toddler in the bathroom. If you're like, oh my gosh, how do I wipe my child's bottom whenever they're standing up? Yes, it is kind of hard, but you get used to it. You can have them do downward facing dog pose, or you can sit them on a seat reducer on the potty and then have them lean forward and you can wipe them that way. But thinking about all the skills they need to learn, how to pull down their pants, pull up their pants. That's really huge skill. Your child's not going to stop having accidents if they can't get their pants down and get their pants back up, right? So we have to think of it in terms of, yes, learning all of these skills. And then the other thing I would say is be really clear when you move forward. Don't be wishy-washy. So if you say, we're going to get rid of diapers, actually put all the diapers in a garbage bag and take them out of your house. Because, and I did this too, and I was walking around doing it I can't believe this is going to be, because I was I'm taking away the ability to be okay, fine, I'll just grab that diaper.
Exactly.
Because we want to be really clear with our kids on what the expectation is and where we're going and support them in getting there. Now, that being said, you might take away all the daytime diapers and still have a pull-up at night, but I would use a pull-up and I would call it nighttime underwear. Make it different than what you've been using and been doing. And even my son, for a long time, he called it oh, I need my nighttime underwear.
That's
because
so cute.
I mean, in some ways he knew it was a diaper, but in other ways I called it different. So he treated it differently.
Yes.
Too,
Yes.
right?
That's so brilliant. That's fantastic.
It really is.
I'm going to be spreading that little bit of wisdom.
Oh my gosh. The nighttime underwear. It's so true. It's just self-talk.
Yeah. We have to give kids a frame of reference. Toddlers are learning so much about themselves and the world for the first time. So there's a huge vacuum to fill, right? And so there's a lot of opportunity for us to talk to our kids, to talk about things, to create expectations, to help them understand the world around them, because they're going to make interpretations of it regardless. So, we have an opportunity to kind of guide them in the process whenever we take the time to explain things and talk about things.
But is it a myth that some kids are ready to be potty trained and some are not ready, or you should wait? Is there a certain time, age? How do you know?
Yeah. So there's a lot of differing opinions on this. And honestly, even the research is kind of split on it. So what I would say is that before 2, you'll likely see a time when your child is really interested in potty training, where they're interested in the potty, what you're doing in there. They're noticing that they're wet, things like this. This is a great time to start introducing the potty. And so you have to really know your child and their own personality. I did not potty train my son until he was 3 because I missed this window because of some other things that were happening. And then I noticed him in his early 2s getting really wanting to control everything. And I was this looks like a power struggle waiting to happen. And so I waited a little bit longer. I probably could have done it sooner, but I actually waited for a window where I felt his resistance was a little bit lower to things. Because you'll notice every 3 to 6 weeks, your child's going to change and grow, and the things that were an issue for that period of time are completely gone. Now they're focused on something else, And so I kind of sometimes you just need to intuitively feel your way through it and connect with your child and look at your toddler versus looking outside of your family, looking outside of your toddler for a set of hard and fast rules.
So important that because people give themselves such pressure, and every kid is different and every family is different. What do you need to add, Devon, that we've left out?
I would say that, if you've been struggling with your toddler and you're not really sure where to start and what to do to have things go differently, the first thing I would have you do is to just start looking for the good. Because in between all of those moments where life feels like a dumpster fire and it feels like your child's behavior is just out of control, there are moments where your child is having the behavior that you want to see but you're not seeing it because your brain is so focused on all of the fires. So the more that you can start noticing and then acknowledging out loud those moments where your child is having the behavior you want to see, not only are you training your brain to see more of it, so parenting is going to start feeling lighter and easier, but your toddler is noticing you having that positive reinforcement, that noticing this positive behavior, so they're going to be more likely to have it. And that's a good way to create a little bit of momentum in the beginning.
That's beautiful.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. Oh, I wish you were around like a couple of decades ago for me. But
Well, we're glad you're here now.
yes, and you know what? Also, I have grandkids, and I think this is really good stuff that I can impart to my daughters and my sons to be able to help their kids. So,
we're
so
going to get them the
valuable.
book. We're going to get them Devon's
Yes.
book.
Definitely. And also, I'm going to tell them that Terrible Twos is now Teachable Toddlerhood. Teachable
Yes.
Twos.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's so important.
Well, Devon,
Awesome.
we want to wish you lots of good luck with your book and with all your work because, I mean, we're believers, both Judy and I. It's about connection. That's what we do here on this podcast.
That's right.
Say It Here. We talk a lot about connection, and it needs to start young. We're really happy
Absolutely.
to have the wisdom and the knowledge that you and your book are going to help spread. It's
Once
going to
again,
make
the
a
name of the
difference in
book
the world.
is, it's called Transforming Toddlerhood, Your Essential Guide for Ages 1 to 5. And it's all about turning chaos into connection. We're thrilled to have had you, Devon. Thank you so much. And that's our truth.
We said it here. Skip perfection.
Choose connection. Thanks so much for listening. If you like what you heard, please follow the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you feel so inclined, leave us a rating and a 5-star review. It really helps other people find the show. If you want to connect with us more, find us at Say It Here Podcast on Instagram and Facebook. Say It Here is sponsored by Safe Parenting. The show is hosted and executive produced by us, Judy Franco and Corey Ajmi. Production and editing support is done by the team at Resonate Recordings. We'll see you in the next episode.